If there's one thing Australia's prided itself on, it's the attitude of a fair go and a stable and sound political system where corruption and cronyism weren't imbued in the social and political fabric. Now, that doesn't mean to say that it didn't exist. It just wasn't as prevalent as it is in the culture of other governments. But now, many politicians in Australia seem to be making up for lost opportunity, where corruption and cronyism have become a malignant cancer, spreading through all levels of government in Australia. Just take a look at how the Andrews government in Victoria have taken corruption and cronyism to a new level, where the stench of political payoffs, favours for those who are aligned, corrupt public servants and ministers, shady dealings, money finding its way into the pockets for the graft of some corporates, the overt destruction of companies like iCook Foods. Federal government contracts being awarded to companies because they are mates of mates or happen to be linked to former ministers or sharing the same bed, like Daryl Maguire and Gladys Berejiklian being a case in point. The Obeid Shonky land deals, and the list goes on. Self-interest and abuse of privilege and power has become a prerequisite for many now entering politics, which is why the formation of the new Federal Anti-Corruption Commission should be applauded. Right? Think again. Because as an independent federal ICAC can never be independent if it is to be funded by the federal government. And therein lies the rub. Whoever is tasked with heading ICAC will have a master it will be beholden to. Just ask Robert Redlich, Commissioner for Victoria's IBAC. Transparency sounds easy, but Australia's new National Anti-Corruption Commission shows that it can be anything but. Legislation introduced by Labor federally has enough checks and balances on how the Commission uses public hearings in its investigations. Now, the fact this one of very few issues attracting controversy in the bill is testimony to how far all political parties have come. This plan promises the biggest integrity reforms at a federal level in over 50 years. But there's a challenge. It's the government's late proviso that the Commission can hold public hearings only where it is satisfied that exceptional circumstances justify doing so. It's a proviso copied from Victoria and how IBAC is administered, and that's a concern for everyone, because it would still be the Commission that decides eliminating the check of abuse. It could also tie up the Commission in legal hoops and jeopardise or frustrate investigations. Now, the new law already follows Victoria, Queensland and Western Australia in making it the default for compulsory hearings to be private. So public ones would already be an exception to that. And here's what's interesting. All are Labor-held states. Where to from here, we need to ask. Well, Transparency International Australia will tell a joint select committee set to review the bill. And here's a straightforward three-step solution to achieving the government's aim, but removing the uncertainties created by this vague, unhelpful barrier. First, the rules on what the Commission must consider before initiating a public hearing can be strengthened in the bill. Second, the legislation establishes an inspector to investigate and report on any complaints about the Commission abusing its power, including its public hearings power. Third, while it would be best to just delete the exceptional circumstances requirement, another alternative would be to define it, to make sure it means what people say it means, rather than what the courts would likely be to imply if put to the test. Now, there are other questions that will be raised about the Commission, especially whether its Parliamentary Oversight Committee is best constituted to ensure ongoing multi-party support and whether its funding is properly guaranteed. But what's more fascinating and even concerning is the Commission's failure to include the Whistleblower Protection Commissioner. Now, included in Haynes and other crossbench bills, that is there. And despite the government's promise to match those models, this makes it imperative to outline when and how it plans to fill that next big gap in the federal integrity system. But When it comes to transparency, the government needs to do more to win back the trust of Australians. That just may be too difficult a hurdle to leap, especially when we all know in a two-horse race, self-interest is always going to be the horse that's backed.